Ma'am, this is an official federal investigation, Agent Chen said firmly. We need you to step back to your property while we complete our inspection. But I've been documenting everything, Patricia insisted, waving her phone. I have photographs of people in government vehicles visiting at strange hours. I've been protecting this neighborhood for years from suspicious characters. Is that right? James finally said, his voice shifting subtly to the tone that had made hardened criminals confess. And how many of your neighbors have turned out to be actual security threats, Ms. Wilkins? I don't understand, Patricia stammered, looking between the agents and James. You're working with him. Is this some kind of cover-up? James sighed, nodding to Rodriguez, who produced a folder from her jacket. Ms. Patricia Wilkins, Rodriguez began officially. We've completed our initial assessment of your report regarding suspicious activities at this address. Our findings indicate no evidence of illegal activity. The materials you identified as potential chemical weapons precursors are standard agricultural supplies, specifically organic fertilizer for tomatoes and chicken feed. The protective equipment, Chen continued, is standard beekeeping gear. The wooden boxes contain actual honeybee colonies, which are regulated and registered with the Virginia Department of Agriculture. Patricia's recording hand slowly lowered, but her indignation remained. Then why do government vehicles come and go at all hours? Explain that. James stepped forward, reaching for his wallet. Perhaps this will clarify the situation. He displayed his FBI credentials. I'm Assistant Director James Harrison of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. Those suspicious visitors were my colleagues bringing work files that couldn't leave secure government facilities. The hazmat suit is standard beekeeping equipment because, unlike terrorists, bees actually do pose a threat to me. I'm slightly allergic. The color drained from Patricia's face as the phone slipped from her fingers, landing in the soft grass. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she found herself completely speechless. Your vigilance is appreciated, James continued, his tone softening. But in the future, perhaps a simple introduction would be more neighborly than surveillance and federal complaints. The following week brought an unexpected transformation. Patricia's curtains remained drawn, her usual garden patrols suspended. Then, on Wednesday evening, James returned from headquarters to find a wicker basket on his porch, containing homemade lavender shortbread cookies and a handwritten note. Director Harrison, I owe you an apology that cookies can't properly express. Fear made me suspicious instead of neighborly. If you're willing, I'd appreciate the chance to start again Patricia P.S. My late husband kept bees for 20 years. If you need any advice, my recipe for preventing swarming never failed him Inside his farmhouse, James smiled as he bit into a surprisingly delicious cookie. In his 3 decades with the Bureau, he'd learned that most people weren't villains, just frightened, mistaken, or misunderstood. He took out his own notepad and began composing a reply, inviting Patricia to the weekend farmers market, where he planned to set up his first honey stand. Sometimes the best intelligence work wasn't stopping enemies, but making unexpected allies. And sometimes, even a Karen could become a friend when given the chance to see beyond her fears. James Harrison had dedicated 30 years of his life to the FBI, rising through the ranks to become Assistant Director of the Counterterrorism Division. His career was the stuff of legend within the Bureau. He had infiltrated 2 domestic terror cells in his younger days, survived a shootout in Baltimore that left 3 agents wounded, and had personally interrogated some of America's most wanted. After decades of high-stakes operations and the weight of national security on his shoulders, his doctor had delivered a blunt ultimatum: find balance or find yourself in an early grave. That's when James purchased the 15-acre hobby farm in rural Virginia, a property hidden at the end of a winding country road with a charming creek running along its eastern edge. The farmhouse itself was over a century old, with creaking floorboards that James found oddly comforting after years of sterile government offices. On Friday afternoons, he'd trade his crisp suits and shoulder holster for mud-caked boots and flannel shirts, becoming unrecognizable to his DC colleagues. On this particular spring weekend, James arrived at his sanctuary with a truck bed filled with wooden boxes. He'd recently become fascinated with beekeeping, partly for the honey, but mostly because working among thousands of stinging insects somehow felt less dangerous than his day job. As he unloaded the boxes, he noticed a flash of movement behind the pristine white fence that separated his property from his newest neighbor's immaculately landscaped yard. Patricia Wilkins, 62, retired school administrator and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, ducked behind her gardening shed, but not before James caught her lowering a pair of binoculars. "Not again," he muttered, waving anyway. Patricia had filed complaints with the county about everything from his rooster's early morning crowing to the height of his compost pile. What James didn't know was that tonight, she'd be making a much more significant call. Patricia Wilkins considered herself a patriot and protector of American values, particularly property values. The farm next door had been owned by a lovely retired couple who maintained a picture-perfect country estate until they sold to that secretive man 3 months ago. Since then, she'd documented a disturbing pattern in her leather-bound notebook. March 10. Subject arrived with 3 unmarked black SUVs. Men in suits unloaded metal cases. March 17. Large delivery of white bags with chemical warnings. March 30. Strange equipment assembled in barn. Possible lab equipment. April 8. Man in full protective gear handling unknown substances near wooden structures. That Saturday morning, as James worked peacefully in his apiary, Patricia's suspicions reached fever pitch when she observed him transferring an amber-colored liquid from the wooden boxes into glass jars. Through her zoom lens, the honey looked ominously like the explosive material she'd seen in a CNN special report on domestic terrorism. "I've seen enough," she whispered to her Persian cat, Mr. Pickles, who watched indifferently from the windowsill. Patricia's hands trembled with righteous purpose as she dialed the number she'd saved in her phone after the See Something, Say Something campaign visited her church group. FBI tip line. "How may I direct your call?" A bored-sounding agent answered. "I need to report a matter of national security," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "I believe my neighbor is manufacturing explosives or biological weapons. He receives unmarked deliveries, wears protective equipment, and has suspicious government connections. People come and go at odd hours in official-looking vehicles." The agent's tone shifted immediately. "Can you provide the address, ma'am?" Patricia smiled triumphantly as she watched James, still in his hazmat suit, carefully handling what she was now certain were dangerous materials. "Justice is coming," she told. Monday morning at FBI headquarters began with the weekly threat assessment briefing. James was reviewing reports of actual terrorist chatter when Deputy Director Collins stopped by his office, barely containing a smirk. "Harrison, I've got something that needs your personal attention," Collins said, placing a red-flagged file on James's desk. "Someone reported suspicious activities at a farm in Loudoun County. The description matches your weekend getaway." James opened the file and nearly choked on his coffee. The report was meticulously detailed, including grainy photos of him in his beekeeping gear, circled in red, with handwritten notes identifying subject in chemical protection equipment. His chicken coop was labeled as a possible explosive storage facility, and his delivery of organic fertilizer was described as chemical precursors arriving in hazardous materials packaging. "You've got to be kidding me," James groaned. "I'm afraid not," Collins replied, now openly grinning. "Your neighbor has provided us with quite the dossier." She even noted that the subject appears to have government connections, since she's seen official vehicles at your property. Protocol demanded an official response, even to complaints targeting FBI officials. Department regulations were clear. To prevent any appearance of impropriety, the complaint would need to be formally investigated. "I'm assigning Rodriguez and Chen," Collins said. "They're discreet, and frankly, they could use a day in the country, unless you prefer to recuse yourself completely." James leaned back in his chair, a plan forming. "No, I'll oversee the investigation personally." Tell them to conduct a formal site visit this weekend. By the book. You're not going to just dismiss this? Collins asked, surprised. James smiled, the same smile that had broken countless interrogation subjects. And miss a teaching opportunity? Never. As Collins left, James pulled up property records for his street, studying Patricia Wilkins' history of complaints against prior neighbors. 15 in the past year alone. It was time for a reckoning, by the book of course. Saturday arrived with picture-perfect spring weather. James was splitting firewood near his driveway, an activity his doctor had actually recommended for stress relief, when the black SUVs rolled up precisely at 10:00 am. He'd timed his outdoor chores deliberately, knowing Patricia's weekend schedule included morning garden surveillance from her second-floor window. Agents Rodriguez and Chen, both rising stars in the Bureau's counter-terrorism unit, approached with perfect professional composure despite the absurdity of their assignment. They'd arrived in full official capacity, badges displayed, sidearms holstered but visible, and carrying the standard site inspection kit. "Sir, we're responding to a complaint about suspicious activity," Agent Rodriguez began, loud enough to carry across the property line where Patricia had emerged, smartphone raised to record what she clearly anticipated would be a dramatic arrest. "Please, Agent Rodriguez, continue with your investigation as protocol dictates," James replied with equal volume. "Would you like to inspect the chicken coop first, or perhaps the beehives that were specifically mentioned in the complaint?" Rodriguez's eyes widened slightly at James playing along, but she recovered quickly. "We should begin with the storage areas and any chemical supplies, sir." As the agents followed James toward the barn, Patricia abandoned all pretense of gardening and marched directly onto James's property, phone still recording. "Excuse me, I'm the one who reported him," she called out. "You need to check those white bags in his shed. I've seen him unloading them at night. And what about those wooden boxes with the hazardous materials inside? He wears a full protective suit to handle them." James turned slowly, letting Patricia get a clear view of his face for the first time without his weekend beard and hat. Something flickered in her expression, confusion, then the first inkling of doubt.